Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling economics
Oh, perfect.
with the insights of Thomas Sowell.
Yeah.
And the book that you've been digging into lately is Basic Economics.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really going to be focusing on like those core economic principles
Okay.
and, just seeing how those play out, in our lives, but also, like the wider world.
Yeah, I think what's really cool about Sowell
Yeah.
is that he really demystifies economics.
Totally.
He makes it so accessible and understandable.
Yeah, and he gives you a different way of looking at the world. Almost like, you're saying like a decoder ring or something.
Right.
Where it's just like, oh, now I see how this all fits together.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he emphasizes right off the bat is what economics is and what it isn't.
Right.
And, he says it's not just about money.
Yeah.
It's about, making decisions when resources are scarce.
Yeah, and really thinking about the consequences of those decisions.
Yeah.
Like he gives the example of the Great Depression.
Oh, wow.
And how, that actually caused more deaths
Really?
than Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined.
Wow.
Which is just like a really stark reminder that,
Yeah.
Even when we have good intentions,
Yeah.
if we don't understand economics,
Right.
the consequences can be really, really severe.
Oh, yeah. That's a heavy one.
Yeah.
And he also talks about, countries that have a lot of natural resources,
Yeah.
but they don't necessarily do that well economically
Right.
compared to Japan or Switzerland
Yeah,
that have fewer natural resources,
exactly.
but they've managed to thrive.
Yeah.
And he's like, why is that?
Well, I think his argument is that it's about
Yeah.
making smart choices,
So,
right?
Yeah.
Like investing in your people, investing in innovation,
Right.
and really focusing on efficient production
Right.
and global trade and things like that.
So it's not just what you have, it's what you do with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about maximizing what you have.
And this kind of brings us to, I think, that classic principle of supply and demand, which Sowell really breaks down in a fascinating way.
Right.
And he uses examples like rent control.
Right.
People think, oh, rent control, make housing affordable.
The affordable housing.
Yeah, but he argues that it can actually worsen the problem
Exactly.
by creating shortages and lowering the quality of housing.
Yeah, because it distorts the whole system.
Right.
Right? Like prices, they're not just random.
Right.
They reflect this underlying reality of scarcity.
Yeah.
So when you try to mess with prices,
Yeah.
you're messing with that
Yeah,
whole...
you're interfering with the natural system.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't always work out the way that you want it to.
Right.
Yeah.
And, another example he talks about is price gouging laws.
Okay.
After a natural disaster,
Yeah.
people want to prevent businesses from
Jacking up the prices.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But he actually argues that, by allowing prices to rise temporarily, that incentivizes suppliers to bring in more goods,
Oh, right. Okay.
which ultimately helps people.
More quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this counterintuitive idea.
Right. Like short-term pain for long-term gain.
Yeah, yeah.
It's fascinating how he challenges our assumptions, especially on these topics that are kind of politically charged.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of things that can be kind of controversial, Sowell really digs into the whole idea of incentives and how they shape economic outcomes.
Yeah,
And he says, systems thrive
right.
when the incentives align with societal goals.
Yeah, so for example,
Yeah.
he compares company-owned McDonald's
Okay.
to franchises.
Right.
Because the franchise owner
Yeah.
has a direct stake
Yeah.
in how well that restaurant does.
Yeah.
So they're more likely to provide good service
Right.
and maintain the quality.
Yeah, because it's their business.
Exactly.
It's not just I'm punching the clock.
Yeah.
This is my livelihood.
Yeah.
So, it's a really interesting example of
Okay.
how, individual motivations can really impact, the overall performance.
Totally.
But then he also talks about how sometimes government policies can create incentives
Yeah.
that work against their intended goals.
Right.
He brings up the example of minimum wage laws.
Okay, yeah.
And, there's definitely a debate around that.
Yeah.
Some people think it's absolutely necessary
Right, a living wage.
to protect workers.
Yeah, worker protection, yeah.
But so Forel also points out,
Yeah.
the potential for job losses.
Yeah.
Especially for people who are like, just starting out.
People with less experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like you have to be careful
yeah.
with how you design these policies.
It's not just like, a simple solution. It's like there's always these like, ripple effects.
Yeah.
That you have to consider.
It's complex.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors at play.
Okay, so let's move on to another concept that Sowell really delves into, and that's the role of profits and losses.
Okay.
He says they act as these like signals that guide resource allocation.
Okay.
And they also like foster innovation.
Yeah. He argues that competition, even though it can lead to some companies failing, ultimately benefits consumers.
Okay, how so?
Well, because it's like a survival of the fittest kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
It weeds out the companies that aren't efficient.
Okay.
Or that aren't producing what people want.
So it drives progress.
Exactly.
Okay.
And like a classic example of that is Kodak.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like they actually invented digital photography.
Really?
But they didn't adapt fast enough.
Yeah.
And so they ended up going out of business.
Wow.
But that paved the way.
Yeah.
For all these new companies.
Right.
To come in and provide better and cheaper digital cameras and, all the technology that we have today.
So ultimately it benefited us?
Exactly.
Even though it was sad for Kodak?
Yeah, it's kind of like this process of creative destruction.
I like that.
Right? Like the old has to die to make way for the new.
To make room for the new, yeah.
And that ultimately leads to economic growth.
Yeah.
And benefits society as a whole.
It's a constant evolution.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
It's never static.
Right. So it's this constant, like, churn and change and stuff.
Yeah. It's dynamic.
Which is kind of cool. I mean, it makes you realize, like, even these, like, big companies, they're not invincible.
Right.
They have to keep innovating.
Yeah, constantly adapt.
And they're going to get left behind.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Alan also debunks some common economic myths.
Oh, yeah. He loves to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like one of them is that, eliminate the middleman.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic.
And you'll save money.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it seems so intuitive.
Yeah.
Like, oh, just go straight to the source.
Yeah. Cut out the middleman.
Right.
But he actually like breaks down why that doesn't always work.
Yeah. He gives the example of wholesalers.
Okay.
And how they actually play a really important role in connecting producers and consumers.
Right.
And they might seem like an extra layer.
Yeah.
But because they specialize and they have these economies of scale, they can actually lower costs for everyone.
So it's more efficient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not always as simple as it seems.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Another myth that he tackles is around income distribution.
Oh, right. The whole rich versus poor thing.
Yeah. And he's like, we often hear about this gap between the rich and the poor.
Right.
Like those are just fixed categories.
Yeah, like static groups.
But he encourages us to think about it more dynamically. He says people move up and down the income ladder throughout their life.
Exactly. Like someone who's a college student today.
Yeah.
Working part-time at Starbucks.
Right.
Could be a high-income earner in a few years.
Totally.
Right.
So it's not like you're stuck in one category forever.
There's income mobility.
Yeah.
Which is a really important concept.
Right. And he also cautions against, like, looking at income inequality just, like, in a single snapshot.
Right.
In time.
It's like judging a movie.
Yeah.
By one frame.
Yeah, totally.
You're not getting the whole story.
You're missing the whole picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to look at it over time and see how things are actually changing.
Right. Okay. So shifting gears a little bit.
Okay.
To the role of government in the economy. So sometimes government intervention can be helpful to improve market outcomes.
Yeah, there are definitely cases where that's true.
Yeah, but he's also very aware of the potential downsides.
Right, the pitfalls.
Yeah, he says that, often political incentives can lead to policies that prioritize short-term gains over long-term economic health.
That's like the classic marshmallow experiment.
Oh, yeah.
But like on a national scale.
Yeah, totally.
Like politicians, they want to get reelected.
Right.
So they're often focused on like what's going to be popular in the short term.
Yeah.
Even if it's not good.
Even if it hurts us in the long run.
Exactly.
Right. It's tough.
Yeah, that makes sense. He also talks about the difference between national income and national wealth.
Okay.
And he says, national income is kind of like our annual salary as a country.
Our income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But national wealth is like all of our assets.
That's our net worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he says both are important
Right.
for a nation's prosperity.
Yeah, because you could have a country.
Yeah, that has a high national income.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're not investing wisely,
Right.
or if they're depleting their resources,
Yeah.
then their national wealth
He's going to go down.
could be really low.
Yeah.
And that's not sustainable.
It's like, someone who makes a lot of money.
Right.
But they spend it all.
Yeah, they're living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
Even though they have a high income.
Yeah. They're not building wealth.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole topic of
Okay.
inflation and deflation.
Oh, yeah. Those can be tricky.
Yeah, they can feel kind of abstract.
Yeah.
But Sowell does a good job of, bringing it down to earth.
Yeah, making it real.
And showing how it impacts our lives.
Yeah.
Like inflation. It's like a hidden tax.
Right.
Because it erodes our purchasing power.
Yeah, your money buys less.
Yeah. And then deflation.
Mm-hmm.
It might seem good at first.
Right.
Because prices are going down.
Yeah, things are cheaper.
But it can actually lead to
a really bad cycle
Yeah.
of decreased investment
Right.
and economic stagnation.
And he uses the example of the Great Depression.
Oh, yeah.
And show how bad deflation can be.
Yeah, it can be devastating.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Another key theme in Sowell's work is the importance of property rights.
Okay.
He sees them as fundamental to a thriving economy.
Yeah, he connects it to things like food security.
Oh.
He says that
Yeah.
countries with strong property rights tend to have more productive farmers.
Okay.
Because they know they're going to reap the benefits.
They have a stake in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're invested in taking care of their land.
Right.
Whereas if you don't have property rights, there's less incentive
Right.
to invest.
You put in the effort. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you might not get to keep the fruits of your labor.
Yeah. Okay. So it's
Yeah.
this seemingly abstract concept. Yeah.
But it has very real consequences.
Yeah. For people's lives.
Exactly.
Okay. And then moving on to international economics. So really challenges some of the assumptions we have about global trade. He takes on the idea that we need trade restrictions to protect domestic jobs.
Yeah, that's a common argument.
Yeah.
But he's like, no.
Okay.
That actually often backfires.
Oh,
because it raises prices for consumers.
Right.
And it makes our industries less competitive.
So it hurts us in the long run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like trying to protect one tree while ignoring the health of the whole forest.
Oh, I like that.
Right. You
Yeah.
got to look at the big picture.
So he's a big proponent of free trade.
Yeah, he thinks it ultimately leads to greater prosperity.
For everyone.
Yeah, for all the countries involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And he also talks about the role of multinational corporations.
Okay, yeah, those are controversial.
Yeah. And he says, they can actually be good for spreading technology and raising living standards.
Wise, especially in developing countries.
Yeah.
Yeah, they bring investment and jobs.
Right.
And, knowledge and expertise.
To places that need it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Of course, there are concerns.
Right.
About exploitation.
Yeah.
And environmental impact.
Right.
But he's like, you have to weigh those concerns.
You're right.
Against the potential benefits.
Yeah.
Especially for the world's poorest people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, it's it's not a simple issue.
No.
There's trade-offs.
Always trade-offs.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. He also highlights how interconnected global markets are.
Right.
He gives the example of a statement from the head of Japan's central bank sending shockwaves through global stock markets.
It's like a butterfly effect.
Yeah.
One little thing can have huge consequences.
Yeah. So it's we're all in this together.
We are.
Economically speaking.
Yeah. For better or for worse.
Right. And so his insights into international economics, I think they really challenge us to think beyond just our own national borders.
It's a global system.
Yeah.
You can't ignore that.
Right. And to consider the global implications of our economic policy.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really emphasizes that we're living in a globalized world.
Totally.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into Thomas Sowell's basic economics, what for you stands out as the biggest takeaway or the most significant thing?
I think for me, what's so cool about Sowell is how he connects all these different ideas like scarcity and prices and incentives and property rights and even global trade into this coherent understanding of how economies actually work.
It's like a framework.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He gives you this like mental model
for thinking about the world.
It's like new glasses to see things.
Totally.
And we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that's really clear is that even when we have good intentions,
right,
economic policies can have like unintended consequences.
Unforeseen consequences, yeah.
So thinking about that, like what are some ways that we can try to ensure that government actions actually benefit society?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
I think it requires like a lot of careful thought. You have to really consider the trade-offs.
Right.
You have to understand incentives.
Yeah.
And you have to recognize that like economic systems are complex.
They're not simple.
No.
Right.
There's no easy answers.
Yeah. I think Sowell's work really encourages us to be humble about economic policy.
Totally.
And to recognize that there's no quick fixes.
No silver bullets.
Right.
Yeah. And that even the best intentions can sometimes lead to bad outcomes.
Yeah, you have to be really careful.
Yeah. Okay, well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
Yeah, it's been fun.
And I think we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, yeah. There's so much more to explore.
So if you're interested in learning more, I definitely recommend checking out Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics.
It's a great book.
It's a great starting point.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For another deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
Loved this video? Smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And don't forget to order the book, link below.